1. The Great Escape in Orange, a crime of illusion. One morning outside a major city bank, dozens of people in bright orange vests gathered. They had responded to a job listing that promised $28 per hour for simple road work, but the employer never showed up. At the same time, a man in an identical vest casually approached an armored truck parked outside the bank. Without hesitation, he pulled out a canister of tear gas, incapacitated the guard, grabbed several bags of cash, and walked away unnoticed. When the police arrived, they found themselves facing a serious problem. There were dozens of people dressed just like the suspect. Security cameras showed the thief slipping through a back alley, hopping onto an inflatable river tube, and floating away, vanishing from sight. He might have gotten away with it if not for an observant local resident. A week before the robbery, this man had noticed someone in an orange vest surveying the area around the bank. A year later, he saw that same man being interviewed on a children's TV show as a newly famous author. The thief had served 6 years in prison, where he spent his time writing children's books. After his release, he published them, becoming a best-selling author. Perhaps his stories were so captivating because he had once pulled off one of the most ingenious heists in history. The $500 million invoice scam. In one of the boldest financial frauds ever recorded, a single man managed to siphon off nearly $500 million from some of the biggest tech giants in the world, simply by sending them invoices. This scammer, an unassuming accountant, spent months researching the internal payment systems of major corporations like Google, Meta, and X. He discovered that their financial departments often processed routine invoices without verifying the details. So he created a fake company with a name suspiciously similar to a real supplier. Then he started sending invoices for services that were never rendered. Since the amounts were reasonable and seemed legitimate, they were paid automatically without question. For years, money flowed into his offshore accounts, unnoticed by the billion-dollar companies. By the time investigators caught on, he had amassed nearly $500 million and had already vanished into thin air. Authorities eventually tracked him down, but not before he had spent millions on luxury properties, cars, and offshore investments. He was sentenced to prison, but the bulk of the stolen fortune was never recovered. His case became a textbook example of how even the largest corporations, with all their security measures, can still be outwitted by a single clever mind. The Tunnel Heist, a silent bank robbery. In 1976, during the long Bastille Day weekend in Nice, France, a group of thieves carried out one of the most meticulously planned heists in history. While the city celebrated, these criminals were underground, digging a tunnel straight into the vault of Société Générale, one of France's most secure banks. They had spent months excavating a passage from a nearby sewer system, carefully avoiding detection. When they finally broke through, they didn't just grab stacks of cash and run. No. They spent hours inside, leisurely emptying more than 40 million francs in cash, bonds, and valuables from the vault. They even took time to drink wine and eat gourmet food, celebrating their success inside the bank itself. Before leaving, they spray-painted a message on the vault wall. Without weapons, without hatred, without violence. The mastermind behind the heist was eventually caught, but his trial was just as legendary as the crime itself. During the court proceedings, he suddenly jumped out of a window, landed on a parked car, and sprinted to a waiting motorcycle. The driver revved the engine, and they disappeared into history. To this day, much of the stolen fortune has never been recovered, and the identity of some of his accomplices remains a mystery. The Sewer Ghosts of Los Angeles. In 1986, a series of daring bank robberies in Los Angeles left the police baffled. The thieves never broke through doors or held anyone at gunpoint. Instead, they emerged from underground like ghosts, striking in the dead of night. Using motorcycles and specialized equipment, they navigated through the city's massive sewer system, carefully cutting holes into bank vaults from below. Once inside, they looted cash, jewelry, and other valuables, each time escaping back into the tunnels without a trace. For months, investigators chased shadows. Every time they got close, the criminals had already moved on, always one step ahead. The biggest scare came when authorities discovered that the thieves were just inches away from breaching another major bank vault, where tens of millions of dollars were stored. But then, nothing. The gang vanished, leaving behind no evidence, no suspects, and no arrests. To this day, the sewer ghosts of Los Angeles remain unidentified, their crime unsolved. Some believe they moved to another city. Others think they retired rich, their fortune hidden beneath the streets they once ruled. The fake captain who stole a city's fortune. In 1906, a man dressed in the pristine uniform of a Prussian guard captain marched confidently into a German military barracks near Berlin. His posture, his voice, and his commands all carried the authority of a real officer. No one questioned him. He ordered a small group of soldiers to accompany him into town. With military precision, they followed as he led them straight to the mayor's office. There, he declared that the mayor and his aide were under arrest for financial crimes. The soldiers, having no reason to doubt their superior, arrested the officials on the spot. The captain then ordered the local police to shut down all phone lines for 1 hour, supposedly for security reasons. With all communication cut off, he walked into the city's treasury, confiscated every penny, and disappeared. The real military only discovered the truth when the soldiers arrived in Berlin, confused as to why no one knew about the arrest orders. By the time they returned, their captain was nowhere to be found. It turned out the mastermind behind the heist was Wilhelm Voigt, a former seamstress and small-time con artist. He had stitched together his own military uniform from scraps bought at second-hand shops, practiced military drills in front of a mirror, and memorized official commands. He was arrested 10 days later after a former accomplice betrayed him. But his crime was so bold and brilliant that even the German Kaiser himself pardoned him, famously saying, "I'm not even angry. This was just too good." 6. The man who outsmarted his own life insurance. In a case that blurred the line between genius and tragedy, a man facing a terminal diagnosis pulled off one of the most creative insurance scams ever recorded. Doctors had given him less than a year to live, and he knew that life insurance policies don't pay out for suicide. But he was determined to secure his family's future, so he devised a plan. First, he purchased a hefty life insurance policy, ensuring that his wife and children would receive a substantial payout if he died in an accident or homicide. Then he did something extraordinary. He bought a meteorite shield, a metal plate designed to protect against falling space debris. On a quiet night, he went outside, tied a gun to the shield, and rigged it in such a way that the bullet would ricochet off it and disappear into the distance. He pulled the trigger. The bullet flew off into the night, and by the time his body was found, the police classified his death as a homicide. The insurance company paid out the full policy to his family, as there was no evidence of suicide. Months later, a farmer miles away found a gun lodged in a tree on his property. When investigators traced it back, they realized what had happened, but by then it was too late. The insurance payout had already been made, and legally the family wasn't required to return a single cent. The man had not only beaten his disease, he had beaten the insurance system itself. 7. The McDonald's monopoly scam, the inside job. In the early 2000s, McDonald's popularized its Monopoly game, a promotional campaign that millions of people played, hoping to win cash and prizes. But behind the scenes, a man who was supposed to ensure the game's integrity turned it into one of the most profitable fraud schemes in history. The mastermind was Jerome Jacobson, head of security for the company that helped McDonald's run the game. Jacobson had access to the sealed packages containing the winning tickets, which were distributed to McDonald's locations across the U.S. He figured out how to steal the winning tickets and secretly pass them off to a network of accomplices. For years, Jacobson used his position to take the most valuable tickets, which promised million-dollar prizes, and distributed them to a group of criminals who would then exchange them for cash. They found winners who were willing to share a portion of their prize money in exchange for Jacobson's tips on how to win. The scheme went on for several years, raking in an estimated $24 million from McDonald's before the authorities caught wind of it. It wasn't until a tipster blew the whistle on one of the winners that the full scale of the fraud came to light. Eventually, several people were arrested, including Jacobson, but not before they had stolen millions from both McDonald's and the unsuspecting public. The scam became the stuff of legends in the world of corporate fraud. 8. The tow truck scam, a simple con with big profits. Sometimes the simplest scams are the most effective, as one former schoolmate of mine proved. He dropped out of high school and used his savings to purchase a used tow truck, starting a small business servicing vehicles at a local airport. On the surface, it seemed like a legitimate venture, but underneath, it was a brilliantly simple scam. He was hired to tow and repair rental cars that had broken down or were left in the wrong spot. However, instead of simply collecting the payment for his services, he found a way to inflate the costs. When he towed a car, he would intentionally damage the distributor, a critical part of the vehicle, which would then require expensive repairs. Once the rental company called him to pick up the car, he would charge them an excessive amount for the supposed repairs. All he did was loosen a few bolts or make minor adjustments, enough to make the car look like it needed work, but not enough for anyone to notice. For years, he made a fortune off this scam, getting away with it because he knew exactly how to manipulate the rental companies into paying him for unnecessary repairs. It was a low-risk, high-reward scam that lasted much longer than anyone expected. The Great Train Robbery of 1963, one of the most famous heists in history, took place on August 8, 1963, when a group of well-organized criminals pulled off a robbery so daring that it still captures imaginations today. The target, a Royal Mail train traveling between Glasgow and London, carrying millions of pounds in cash. The thieves, led by a man known only as Bruce Reynolds, had inside information about the train's route and the exact time it would pass through a remote area. They carefully planned the heist for months, knowing that it would take place during a late-night shift when fewer people would be around. The criminals used a disguised truck to block the train's path, and once it stopped, they ambushed the guards. They then removed bags of cash from the train's carriages, making off with £2.6 million, equivalent to over £50 million today. Despite the police effort, the robbers got away with it. They hid the money in various locations and used it to live in luxury for a while. However, the investigation eventually caught up with them, and many were arrested, but only a fraction of the stolen money was recovered. The story remains one of the most successful and daring robberies in British history. 10. The Amsterdam Diamond Heist, 2001. A jewelry store employee in Amsterdam pulled off one of the simplest yet most effective diamond heists in history. He had worked in the store for years, earning trust. One day, he walked in carrying an empty microwave box, acting like it was just another delivery. Instead of filling it with electronics, he casually loaded it with diamonds worth millions. Then, with a polite smile and a wave to his co-workers, he walked out through the front door, never to be seen again. The diamonds never recovered.